Goob Station has added the long-awaited Blob. It was ported from, I think, some Russian server. I don't know the full lore and history of it, but now that it's on Goob Station, it will surely find its way to other servers that use Goob content and so on and so forth. This is just kind of how things work in an open source game. It'll make its way around. This is not like a mechanical deep dive video or an explanation. I don't fully understand the whole thing myself because I haven't actually really played with it that much, but I'm basing it somewhat off Space Station 13 knowledge, and I do know what the Blob is. The Blob, in order to actually even appear, is either a mid-round antagonist or possibly a round start antagonist. Basically, it's an infected creature or a person. If you're a round start, you'll be a humanoid that will have the Blob infection. So the mid-round antagonist is actually a cancer mouse. In the top left, you have one unique action for the Blob, which will instantly destroy your body and create a Blob core. It is also worth mentioning that if somebody kills you, you will instantly spawn the Blob core, so you don't actually have to use the action, but you're probably going to want to not be directly in combat with someone. So that means round start blobs have a better chance of actually being in a place you want to be before you turn into a blob, because people are going to notice a cancer mouse and try to kill it instantly for sure. When you use the blob action, you will instantly give yourself, and you will leave behind what is known as the blob core, most important organ of the blob. By destroying the core, the infection will cease. So this turns the game into a pseudo RTS. In the top left, we'll just quickly hover over all the options. There's swap chemicals as your first option. This lets you swap what your blob infection is, or what the blob entity is. I don't know the best way of describing this. There's 5 different types. By default, you are reactive spines. You just deal brute damage and have no special modifiers. There's blazing oil, which makes you deal burn damage and light targets on fire, but makes you vulnerable to water. There's regenerative materia, deals 6 brute and 15 toxin, and the effect is that your blob core regenerates 10 times faster. It also says you generate an extra point, but in my very short testing, it doesn't seem like you actually do that. Explosive lattice is you deal burn damage and explode targets, dealing 10 brute damage. Your spores will explode on death. We'll get to what spores are in a minute. You become immune to explosions, and you take more from burn and shock. Finally, we have the electromagnetic web. You deal burn and have a chance of causing EMP pulses when attacking. Blob tiles cause an EMP pulse when destroyed, but you take more brute and heat damage. If you've been paying attention in the background, the blob core will automatically spread out regular blob tiles. These blob tiles will end up attacking basically anything nearby that is not a blob tile in order to make room for the blob, more blob tiles. The blob tiles themselves don't really do anything other than spread your area of effectiveness of where you can actually place things and do other actions. For example, the second action you have is jump to your core. That just moves your camera. The third action is place a factory blob. It costs 80 resources. Turn selected normal blob into a factory blob, which will produce up to 3 spores and a Blobbernauts if placed next to a core or a node. So we could just place this right here, for example, and now the blob factory will now spawn blob drops. After some time, we'll see that a blob drop has indeed spawned. These are basically just basic level fighters that will go around and attack people directly. So for example, if I spawn in a Jurist, we'll see that the mobs automatically will attack anyone nearby that is not a blob. When they end up critting the person, the blob drops will try their best in order to actually infect that person. The person will then be directly infected and turned into what is known as a blob zombie. So you can spread your influence further by infecting the crew directly and having more powerful effects to protect your blob core and your blobs in general. Another action that blobs can do is if you left click on anything that is not yours, you can spend resources to have the nearest blob tile directly attack that object.
Confirmed outbreak of level 5 biohazard on the station. All personnel must contain the outbreak.
As the blob grows in tiles, depending on the station, once you reach a minimum number of tiles, it will warn everyone on the station that there is a level 5 biohazard outbreak, which is the blob. Bigger stations, you can have more tiles placed before you are warned, but I'm on the dev environment, so it happens at a very quick number. This warning will not happen this fast on larger stations. But, as I was saying, you can also left-click empty tiles to spend resources to spread your tiles directly, the blob tiles. You can then use that to just directly attack something like this wall, and then destroy the girder, and now that'll let you spread that direction. You can left-click to spread out a certain direction, but you will eventually hit a range where it says no node or resource blob nearby. So that moves us on to the resource blob. Turn select a normal blob into a resource blob which generates resources, but it must be placed next to a core or a node. Well, the core is over here, so if I place a resource node directly next to it, we will see that it is like just like yellow effect, and you'll see +3s appear out of it, indicating that we are generating more resources every time that animation completes. If I try to place a resource node not next to a core, it'll either say already connected, or if I place it down here, there's no node or resource blob nearby. Number 5 is a node blob. You can place a node blob not next to the core or next to other nodes, but if I place it down here, we now have a blob node, a mini version of the core that allows us to place special blob tiles around it. So now we can place another resource node next to it, meaning we are spreading our economy quite well. That's really the bread and butter of spreading as a blob. You make factory nodes to protect yourself with mobile units. You make resource nodes to increase your resource generation in general. And you just want to move your tiles to wherever is effective in order to secure areas. The 6th action is to create a Blobbernaut. Creates a Blobbernaut and just like the factory. Each factory can only do this once. The Blobbernaut will take damage outside of blob tiles and heals when close to nodes. So if I go to a factory like so, press 6 on it, we will see that a Blobbernaut has spawned.
All personnel maintain the outbreak.
And since I'm doing this in the dev environment, I got rudely cut off. Once the blob has grown to a certain number of tiles, it will trigger a delta alert. However, the blob is not 1 at this point. It's just indicating that the blob is getting near victory. The blob's victory is just, as you probably can imagine at this point, determined by how many tiles you have infected. The Blobbernaut, though, is a ghost roll mob. That means somebody could take over this and go attack people. It does quite a lot of damage. It is fairly tanky, and if it has to stay near your paths, so you really want to try to spread out your paths towards tiles where people are going to come and try to kill your blobs, because people are going to be using range weapons, so you need to get your mobile units out there, basically your Blobbernauts, your main fighter, to try to stop those people directly. And I'm going to leave this in. I actually started a plasma fire because I literally put the blob down in Atmos, and I was expecting to get through my demonstration faster than I did. But yeah, fire will basically insta-kill you. Some things you could do to protect your core from having things like fire accidents happen is if you alt-click a tile, a regular blob tile, you'll turn it into a strong blob tile. This gives the tiles significantly more health. It doesn't change your damage modifiers, but it just makes them way more likely to survive actual damage. If you alt-click it, again, it will turn into a reflective tile. It's not guaranteed reflect. It also mentions that it doesn't deal with brute as well. That isn't necessarily true. They just have less health overall, but their modifier damage doesn't change. Only like what type of blob you are really changes that. But if you shoot it, it does reflect, but it's not like the highest reflect chance ever. It's high. I managed to actually down myself, but with some luck and like multiple people shooting you, people will be able to still laser their way through it, but it will have to make the crew think twice about just spamming lasers into you. However, though, the reinforced strong blob tile actually can take quite a lot of laser shots, almost 5, or it takes 5 from an antique laser pistol, where a normal one will only take 1 shot. So it's worth considering that you're spending double the points to get a reflective tile, and depending on bad RNG, you may not even really get the extra benefit out of it, and it has less health, so people can melee through it if they're persistent enough. Welding torches are really dangerous against you. They actually do 16 damage, because on the default blob you take double heat, so they can 2-hit normal tiles, but a strong tile is actually better than a reflective tile against melee heat damage, because this only reflects. It doesn't actually give it heat resistance. So just something worth considering. There is a decent bit of element of strategy here for the blob. Also, you can't move through blob tiles at all, and on Goob, where you can actually crawl, you can't crawl over them either. So as a general strategy, you should probably try to use strong blob tiles anywhere in doorways or more narrow choke points. They do cost 15 points. It's pretty expensive, but you want to make it harder for the crew to be able to get to your core. The overall goal is to never let your core take any direct line of damage. Your core does have, like, I think 400 health, but you just shouldn't let them touch your core if you can avoid it. And really, the last feature of the show is the splitting. So I used the split on the blob core. If I were to A ghost, go in the ghost rolls, you can see that now somebody else can actually take over as this blob. So it's a pretty neat element to allow more people to be able to play as a blob. And that actually managed to crash my dev environment, but I think you get the picture. Once you get the Delta alert, the blob is exactly halfway there to winning, so the crew really needs to act and destroy as many tiles and keep the tiles from being able to spread as much as possible. As soon as the blob, though, reaches their required tiles, maximum tiles to win, it will just basically end. I think at 13, this is where you would see things like the nuclear bomb cutscene blowing up the station, because it'd be like CENTCOM bombing it directly. But for now, at least on the dev map, it doesn't explode. Maybe it does on the real map, but it really is just the blob victory. On a large map, there's going to be a ton of nodes, factories, and point generators that the crew is going to have to deal with if it even gets to this size. Again, it's really just green texting. There we go. So I hit my required size, and it will just say the blob has taken over the station. Due to the fact this is already a pretty lengthy video for not being an explanation video, there's a lot more to explain, a lot more nuances and things you can do to counter the blob, play as the blob, etc. But just showcasing it. Very cool. Depending on your server, you either already see the blob if you play on Goob or Goob related servers, but servers that take from Goob code might end up seeing this sometime soon. Awesome work for everyone who worked on this, and thank you for watching.